Yo, what's up, everybody? I have Clemson Tigers finest Ashley Persson with us today. Super pumped about the conversation, see where it goes, as always. But before we get going, wild or funny story, what you got?
Yeah, so I grew up playing softball my entire life, and I also loved school, so I was super involved. And it was my going into my freshman year of high school and playing travel ball. My sister knew who our high school coach was going to be, all these things, small community travel sports, everyone knows everyone. So I knew everyone that was going to be at tryouts, this, that, and the other, but it's my freshman year, so you have all those nerves about freshman year in general. And then you're like, okay,
Yeah, yeah,
now we're
yeah.
going to go have tryouts for softball. And so we are warming up standard stuff out there on the field, literally just running back and forth, doing like some grapevines, nothing crazy warming up. And we had our obviously our cleats on. Well, my spike got stuck in the grass while I was running. And I just heard a huge pop, like truly like, and I couldn't,
Uh,
yeah, couldn't move. So I was like, okay, what's going on? Tried to lift my leg, and my leg was like hanging from my hip. So my
oh,
ninth grade
damn.
freshman year busted my hip. The worst part about it, the most embarrassing part, everyone's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "I think I just broke my hip." I'm like, "No way." People are like, "You're 14. What is going on?" I'm like, "I have no clue." The worst part was that our trainer came, very nice, put me on the back of a golf cart and had to drive me through, kind of going fast through football practice. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. I'm laying on the back of this golf cart. It's my freshman year of high school. They're just hauling butt through football practice, and I'm just crying, sobbing in pain. Everyone's like, what is going on? So, yeah, I broke my hip freshman year of high school, like an old woman, but I ended up,
Doing
it
some
had to be surgery.
grapevine, that damn grapevine.
So it wasn't even anything cool. Like it wasn't a cool play. It wasn't anything. People like, what'd you do? I was like, I was warming up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love
No
it. I
big
love
deal.
it. Well, before we jumped on, you said you're from like California, and then you
Yeah.
mentioned small town. So what part of California are you from?
So I am from Temecula, California. It's about 45 minutes from San Diego. And
Okay.
so from there, and then it's actually in a straight line across America. Like if you looked at a map of where I'm from to Clemson, I just,
Oh,
yeah, pretty
oh.
interesting.
So you're a West Coast or East Coast kind of gal?
So I wanted to be an East Coast kind of gal. I think at my core, I'm learning I'm a West Coast
West.
kind of gal, but I'm a little more Southern than I thought I was.
Interesting. Why? Like, what do you mean? In what
Uh-huh.
regards?
In what regard? So I just slow down. The people are very kind, very different. That was a culture shock. In
Yeah.
California, it's not that people aren't nice, but they would say something I'm like, "Are you sure you want to help me? Is that really what you're asking?" I moved here and people are like, "Do you need a truck? Do you need me to move your dresser? Do you need me to do this?" And I was like, "Are you being serious?" And they were like, they're so serious. And I'm down for that. So I think I'm slower, I don't know, the water around here, we're surrounded by water. It's just a different vibe. I love
Yeah.
California, but
Yeah. 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 So would you go back or stay here?
oh, that's a great question. At the end of the day, if my family never fully leaves California, maybe, but I love it down here. I love the Southeast. So I love
Yeah.
Clemson. I love the upstate. Charlotte, super cool. So I don't know. I'm just kind of riding it out.
Yeah. Yeah. How much? One of like common questions I ask, like just talking with people from just bouncing around like all over the country. Yeah, I'm originally from Birmingham, went
Mhm.
to college at West Virginia. And that was a massive culture shock going to the Northeast when they're like, fuck you, bro. Like everything was just like die hard in your face, super
Yep.
blunt. I was like, you guys are so mean. Why?
This is great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'm curious, like, how much of a like culture shock was it for you, and then like tie that into like what you're doing now, because I think that's like super important of like
Yeah.
talking with people and giving them different perspectives. I would call it like seeing the world in a different way, right? Like you just don't know what you don't know if you've never been to different places.
Right. So culture shock wise, I would say one, I'm a foodie.
Mm,
So in California, you can eat anything that you want within a matter of 5 minutes. I could have it at my door or get to it 24 hours a day, and it's probably going to be really good.
yeah.
That is just not the case here at all. The best food is coming out of my kitchen.
Yeah. Oh, damn, damn.
So that was a culture shock. I'm like, okay, things close on Sundays. They are closed
Yeah.
for church. They are closed early. They don't open. And so that was a huge culture shock. I'm like, okay, I have to adjust. Like, what am I gonna eat? What do I want to do in terms of that? And then I would say pace of life and traffic, huge. It's funny, people
Yeah.
joke around here on like a football Saturday. They're like, there's just so much traffic. So when I moved here, I was waiting, like LA traffic. I'm like, or Atlanta traffic.
True that.
I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, let's see what you're talking about. I'm like, I got home in 20 minutes. What do we, there? This is not sure. 80,000 people. It's a lot of people to filter
Yeah.
out of a
Yeah. Yeah.
stadium.
Yeah.
But I'm
Fair.
like, y'all, this is not traffic. um, and then there's just different types of people. So I think where I'm from is a lot more diverse, obviously, than the
Yeah.
upstate of South Carolina. So that's been an adjustment. But in context to what I do day to day, I would say it's different. So I started in career services as a GA actually at our career center when I came here for my master's program. Even like that culture on campus versus the culture in athletics is so different. And so I think in terms of our students that are student athletes are usually from a lot of different places. So
Yeah.
that's a connection point immediately. They've
Right.
probably come from somewhere else, and so have I. So culture shock in terms of living in South Carolina is something I connect with a lot of my students on. A lot of my students don't want to stick around Clemson. Obviously, they have big aspirations to make it and do things, and most of them, a lot of them, are going to. But not many of them seem to be small town folks that are going to stick around.
Yeah. 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 Totally. Where'd you do your undergrad?
Cal State San Marcos, so kind of like North County, San Diego area. Yep. And
And
then
then what
came
drew
out.
you out there?
I just wanted something completely different. So it was a small state school, about 40 minutes from where I grew up, about 15 minutes from the beach, had a great experience, but it was small. And people, it was a commuter school. It was a lot of people going back to college to finish their
Yeah.
degrees, which was super cool. But I wanted to be somewhere where you walked around the town and people wanted to be here, and it was their life's mission to be at this place, and had a football team and had that small town college feel, just because I didn't get that in my undergrad. And so I decided to apply. I applied to like 8 or 9 different grad schools, was not planning on coming to Clemson. And that's a whole story, but at the end of the day decided like there was just like a nagging, like a feeling. I was like,
Yeah.
I have to go there. And thank God I did. It's the best thing. I tell people all the
Yeah.
time,
Yeah. Yeah.
best thing I ever did was coming to Clemson ever.
So did you want to? This is like super interesting. I feel like a lot of the people that I've talked to, like in either athlete development, player development, whatever you want to call it, player engagement, like
Yeah.
within like professional sports, a lot of them started in like academics. So did you like
Mhm.
did you know that was a stepping stone, or was academics the thing at the beginning and then this kind of just evolved?
It is true. I think a lot of people do start in academics. I think what's hard is that explaining what I do to people is people don't always understand it. I'm like, well, so what do you do? I'm like, I don't work in a classroom. Like, I'm not a professor. I'm not a lecturer. They're like,
Yeah.
so you do leadership? I'm like, I do the holistic person thing. Like, we care about them as whole people. So I originally, my master's is in student affairs. So I don't necessarily have an athletics background, more so higher education. So just college students in general. And so through my grad assistantship and then being at Clemson, knew this was something I wanted to maybe kind of step my way into. And
Hmm.
I was actually able to get an internship when I was a grad student in the office that I work in full time now. So I also do our internship program, big on the internship thing. I'm like, it will get you a full time job. I'm living proof. But so I kind of got in here and got an internship and then did that for about 2 semesters. And I was like, yes, this is something I want to do still while I had my grad assistantship at the Career Center.
Hmm.
And then a full-time role came open in our office, and I told my supervisor, I said, "You're going to see my name in that applicant pool." And I applied, and it worked out. And so I think I always knew I didn't play in college, but I was surrounded by people who did, siblings,
Yeah.
cousins, close friends, and I did play most of my life. Um, so I knew that somehow, some way, I might make my way back into athletics. I didn't know that it would be like this, but knowing about myself, knowing my interests, what I like to study, and just having relationships with people, it makes complete sense. But it's not something that you just know about. That's like, oh, that's a career path I want to go
Yeah.
into until you kind of get in athletics, academics, and you're like, oh, that's something I can do. And then you kind of do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, it's definitely catching fire. Like it's definitely
100%.
becoming more like more mainstream, like more known, I guess.
Yes.
Um, as you can probably attest, your LinkedIn inbox is probably full. I feel like everyone I talk to, like, yeah, like people hit me up all the time. But I think going back to even a lot of them say too is most of these people don't even know what I actually do, just like your family, friends, or whoever is like, so what the
Right.
hell is it that you actually do?
What is your
They
job?
just
Yeah.
see like you in an athletic department office and see you on the field or the court or the practices or like whatever, just hanging with everybody, right? Like
Right.
you're just paid to hang out with people.
No, that's not the case. Sometimes I feel I'm like, okay, a lot of my job is students coming into my office, building rapport and having a conversation, which I feel like that might throw some folks off too. Cause I'm like, but that's how I build trust. And then that's how I get them to come back for resources, for help with career stuff, leadership things, life things. So it's kind of weird. It's kind of tricky.
It is. And I think a lot of people struggle. They see that as cool, but like deep down, they actually struggle with the ability to make connections. Like I don't know that a
Mhm.
lot of people like are genuinely good at just like having conversations with people that like you really don't even know yet. And then hopefully within like whether it be one conversation or six conversations start to get down to like what's like valuable to them. Like I always think of
Right.
it like beyond like surface level, right? Beyond substance, beyond surface. Like what are your values? Like what is it? Is it family? Is it
Yes.
faith? Is it food, right? Like what are the things that like you want to talk about? Because they're not in there to listen to you.
No, and it's that's what so that's exactly it because I always say I struggle too because when they walk into my office, like when they walk in that door, they are everything in addition to who they are as an athlete. They're a student athlete, but who are you outside of that? What do you enjoy doing? Who are you as a person? What are your values? So oftentimes I won't bring up their sport unless it's something they kind of bring up because for me their
Hmm.
value is not dictated by their performance on the court, on the field, whatever that looks like. Because in a town like Clemson, when they walk outside of this building, for most of this town, a lot of it is. And that's the reality of it for a lot of them. But it's hard too because then you have these students come in, they've spent their whole life training, practicing, and competing to be the best,
Yeah.
and that is important to who they are. So, what's the balance of recognizing that and letting them know beyond that? You're going to walk in my office. We're probably going to talk about pizza. I'm probably going to ask you what position I would play if I played your sport, and we're going to just have a conversation not related at all to what you're doing the rest of the day as a student athlete. Um, but that's where you get to the relationship building, and that's my philosophy in terms of working with students is it's about relationships. Like if
Yeah.
I can show you that I care about you as a person, that's what matters to me, because it's
Yeah.
not that they're not getting that in other places, but in other spaces it's very performance based. Are you training to be able to execute XYZ? And I'm like, I want you to be a good person, I want you to be able to get a job, I want you to be a good leader, that type of thing.
Yeah. It's such a delicate balance because I guess like bigger name ones too, like bigger name athletes that just have more like notoriety, especially if you're in sports like football. It just naturally like
Yeah.
wrestling's my background, like just is, right? It's just different, right? Like
Yeah.
we don't get 80,000, we get 1,000, right? Like it's just
Different. Yep.
naturally, yeah, totally. And so I think of because they naturally have like their guard up like so much
Mhm.
of like being able to never fall in the boat of anyone else. It's like one of the teams that I'm surrounded by. There's several athletes, but it's always like not even asking them for, hey, I have a family member to like, could you sign this like for a family member, right? Like even people like the coaches have been like, yeah, but I think they would. I'm like, they probably would, but like I just never want to get categorized in that boat.
Yes, 100%. Because once you, it's, they just might see you differently, and then they might not
Yeah,
have that
you
same
can't go back.
trust.
You
You
can't go
cannot.
back.
No, that's true. It's tricky. And like I said too, some of them they come in, they might have like a huge game or a huge,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. And it's like, okay, I saw that. I support you. I'm watching. I'm like supporting you always. And if you didn't have a good game, you're gonna get the same Ashley
Yeah, yeah, totally.
regardless.
Totally.
And it is tricky in a town like Clemson where people know that there are some names that are living room names across the country. And it's like, I care about that. And you're just coming in and I'm going to look at your resume today. And that's what's important.
Because you didn't do what I asked you to do.
Because you didn't do, and okay, that's another thing that's hard too. I think there's this idea that student athletes get things done for them, or people just assume, oh, they kind of shuffle them, pass them along. But when I was still doing my master's program, I was a mentor for student athletes just to get more experience working with this population of students. And so through that academic program, I sat down with a couple of students each week, and it's called strategic mentoring. And we would kind of plan out their week. What assignments do you have? How are you managing your time? And that was so strict. Just, I can't touch your laptop. I can't touch this. We can't sit on the same side of the
Mm.
table just because of any perception of anyone doing anything. And
Ah.
so that stuff is like locked in. And then I find myself in a space where, if they are in spaces in town or on campus where people are like, oh, you are so and so, so we're going to kind of shuffle you along. Maybe there's not as much accountability, but that's where it's tricky too, because in what I do, you're going to be held accountable.
But I think that I
And
think
I'm
they
not saying that they're
actually
not
want
held
that. Yeah,
accountable.
yeah, yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
right.
I do think they actually want it. I think that some people fear them because of their name, or intimidated is probably a better word of like, well, I don't
Right.
want to push them in like that way. But I think deep down, it's like that's what they need, like 110%.
That's
Because,
what you need. Yep.
and I think
That's the
that,
real world.
right, right, all those things translate, right? I don't want to say like, I used to like totally adopt like the I don't know if it's a saying or a quote, whatever, like the how you do anything's how you do everything. I think that there's like,
Some nuances.
yeah, 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 right? Like I think it's like if you're scared to ask out a girl, I don't know that 100% translate into speaking in front of 100,000 people, right? Like I think that there's
It's a little
like,
different.
yeah, 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 yeah. Like I think there's a different set of nerves that are going on there.
Yeah.
But I do think, yeah, like you said, there is some correlation there.
Hmm.
And so I think that deep down, like intuitively, like they know and understand that. And then as you've probably experienced is actually heard this, it was watching the Last Dance Michael Jordan documentary, and it was his second coach, Doug Collins, and he was like, one of the first things that I recognized with Michael was the only way to gain his respect was to push him. Right. And so that's kind of always stuck with me. It's like to gain their respect is like you just have to push them, right? Like you just have to
Right.
nudge them. And it's like when they want to fight, you just fight back, right? Like, no, you are going to do this.
You're going to do it. Someone's going to hold you accountable. And I think that's interesting too, because they're also different. So sometimes someone will come in and it takes me meeting them or interacting with them twice, and then they come back and they're like, okay, let's look at internships, let's look at resumes. Sometimes it'll be a whole semester and they kind of
Yeah.
meander by, and then a semester later they finally come in after we've had a chance. And so some, I think, want to be pushed, some it's a little bit different. um, but at the end of the day, I think it's a space, I work in a space where we will hold them accountable, and at their core I think that's why we connect well, is because that's real life. That's what they need and probably want at the end of the day, which doesn't always make it easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
not the case, but
Yeah.
so
Going back to when you were talking about like when people ask you like what you do and you said like developing the like holistic person, I think was like the
yes.
line. How do I want to ask this? Because I feel like a few years ago that was such like a buzz term, right? And
Right.
how much is that like actually caught on is no shade to a lot of coaches, but I think that like most coaches throughout the history of time have always been like, we develop strong young men and young women. It's like, do
Hmm.
you? Like, and so I'm curious, like how much like is it really moving into that? Because I do think that like the mental health space is becoming more prevalent. I think people are
Yes.
recognizing that it is a thing and that people need to talk about these things. And so having different sets of like people to go to,
For
right?
sure.
Like you've got sports psych, you've got somebody like you've got like mentors, you've got life coaches, like everybody kind of has their role. And so how's that kind of like fully developed, come full circle in y'all's world, I guess?
Hmm. I think it's interesting because sometimes, like when you start listing out all those things that are resources, one, that's fantastic. But two, we live in a world where there's so much information and there's so much available to them. It's almost like, who do I go to? So if I'm
Yeah.
struggling with this, who's going to help me? And we're fortunate here where we have great coaches, great relationships with them. And I do think that they're in a space where that truly is their goal, is to develop them as people. Obviously, teams have different cultures and they operate differently. So I would say for some of our student athletes, they are getting that holistic development, what maybe I can offer or my colleagues, they're maybe getting that on their team through different
Mm,
people. Some, it's a little different, or it's a larger roster size. So maybe that's harder. But I think wherever the student decides to lean into, they're going to get that, whether that's in sports psych. Clemson just has been developing. We have a whole new wing in our building. It's academic student athlete development and then mental health. So they can come into this building and they could go see their academic advisor, they could come see me, or they could go down and see any of our mental health staff. And so I think it's wherever they make that connection and decide to fully lean into it. If they build that relationship with that person, whether that's me, and then I'm like, oh, you should talk more to your academic advisor about that. Or if they lean more into their academic advisor, me having a relationship with them, oh, you should go see Ashley or you should go see Mike. They're going to be able to help you with that. But I think it's also changing, and it's a conversation we have often just with NIL, the transfer portal, all of these
yeah.
things potentially coming down the pipeline. We're like, what will this look like in 5 years? Will this be that students are employees? Will we operate more like HR, but they're still people and they're still students? But will we have a space? Will that not happen? So will this be even more important as people are transitioning and shifting? And so those are all things that I
Yeah.
think it's easy to get caught up in every single day. But if I just, if we're focusing on what I think is important, and I think what most people that do what I do get into this for, if you focus on those reasons, caring about them as a whole person and being intentional about it, it's one thing to say you're going to do something, but how much am I actually paying attention? Like if there's an opportunity available for mechanical engineering students, and I know that we have 3 or 4 engineering students, am I able to be like, yep, so and so, list 3 people off immediately because I put the time in to learn about them and know that? I think that's a different story. And it's an intentionality. And I think that's where we get to be intentional because the students enter our space. And once you build that relationship, maybe drop some of those walls, and we do learn more about that stuff. My boss always says, she kind of calls us the waiting room to the mental health wing. Like we kind of start to get some stuff and you're like, okay, I'm here, I hear you, and we're listening for those things where it's like, maybe let's take a walk down the hall to get you to
Yeah.
talk to
Yeah.
some. Um, so that was a roundabout, but I think at the end of the day, wherever the student leans into, especially at a place like Clemson, where we are so fortunate to have the resources that we do,
Right.
wherever they lean in, I think they're going to get that development or get connected to a place where they can get that in a way that's going to best serve them.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense because even like early on, like with the teams that like I work with, it's like I literally tell them, I'm like, I'm not the way, I'm a way. Like
Correct.
there's no like I'm not standing here in front of you and saying it's like I know that what I'm telling you works and is true, but like it may not be for all 20 of you. It may not be for all 30 of you, and that's okay.
Okay. Yep. And that's something I think like in our roles is I have to relinquish that too. Like I have to know that, if certain students don't want to come in and chat and mingle, whatever that looks like, they're probably doing that somewhere else and they're hopefully getting that support that they need in another space. And it's just, we're here, we support them. If they ever do decide to come in or their teammates let them know, oh, you can go talk to Ashley. She could help you with that, whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, I like that. It's not
And
the way,
and I
it's a
think
way.
too, it's very interesting, like as you build those like deeper and like more the word I always use, like intimate, like relationships, like with
Right.
people in the sense of like they like really, really, really trust you is when you tell them about other resources of like, hey, like compound with these. It's like they're always like, well, like I don't want you to like. I'm like, bro, this is not about me.
Literally not about me.
Literally, it is okay. They're like, because I don't want you to think that like I'm going there, but not. I'm like, bro, this is to help you.
You, yes. Well, and I think what that does at the end of the day, if I'm like, I actually don't have the answer for you. I don't know
Yeah,
that. And I'm not going to make something up. I'm going to send you where I think it's best for you to go. And I think that's where sometimes it clicks, like you're talking about, like, oh, okay. They being honest about it. Like if
yeah.
I don't know what to tell you, I'm going to have someone that does.
Yeah, and I think the things that comes to me is like being able to like stay in your lane of like
100%.
as cliche as it is like knowing your superpowers and like knowing that like hey this is how I can serve you and
Right.
beyond the scope of that it's like I either need to go ask and find out for you or I need to go send you like somewhere
Yes.
else.
100%. There's always that. It's back to the accountability thing, but sometimes I'll get, a question and I'm like, it's like the typical check three before me. Like, I'm like, did you read the calendar? Did you read the instructions? Did you read the message? I'm like, we are building skills that are going to help you. I have the answer. I'm not going to tell you right now because you know that you can look in these three places first.
Well, I think even going deeper than that. Okay, so like identity is my jam. I always say it's like you don't get what
Yes.
you want, you get who you are, right? And
Mhm.
so it's like if you don't have what you want, then you're not the version of you. And so it's like you have to take the time and just figure out who you are right now. Let's get I call it 1.0 and 2.0, right? Like we got to get this version of you before we can ever even build out this version of you. But it's
Mhm.
fascinating is like we have this awesome ability to basically create whoever we want. And they're like, well, tell me who I need to be. I'm like, but that's not the point.
That's not what I'm
like,
asking.
like literally that defeats everything because like if I do that, then you're literally basically going to crumble this up in a week and like it's never going to become anything living.
Yes. Well, and so I watched your TED Talk, and I
Okay.
actually where you challenge people at the end to write 10 things. I wake up and I journal every morning and I do my devotional and gratitude XYZ. And this morning I was like, okay, I'm going to write 10 things down that I love about myself. It's funny. I was doing it and I get to the 10th one and I kept going. I was like, dang.
That's actually impressive because early on that was like a very like easy quick exercise like I could give people of like finding value and worthiness within themselves,
Mhm.
right? And it's just like baseline like what are 10 things that like you can like brag about yourself essentially of. And God's honest truth, the average time is about 43 minutes to get that accomplished.
Wow. Okay.
And so
I
because at first like I think you might be a little bit different too is like because a like you're in the space and you've probably had like your own like mentors and like people like
Yes.
whether it be a year or 5 years 10 years however long it's been because uh even one of my mentors told me is it's like as you continue to do this Ryan like it'll get to a point where it's like 2025 is like that sticking point but like be able to like get 100 or the analogy I always give like kids is I'm like do people write books on themselves and they're like yeah I'm like okay that's my goal is somebody asked me tell me about you is I want you to be able to be like bottle of wine in half your day because here we go right like
Yeah,
I gotta
let's
like
go.
read yeah I gotta
Lock
read
in.
this whole thing to you so that's fascinating that like you were able to like accomplish that because most people yeah it takes a
Yeah.
while especially
Well,
females.
and so I was doing, and after you said the average was what, 43 minutes, I'm like, oh, okay. I think I did it in about a minute and a half.
That's
Um,
impressive.
but I've had my own journey of like through identity, through just figuring out who I am in my early 20s. And so I think that might look, like you said, a little different. But I think that's important in the work that I do too. And I graduated undergrad at the end of 2020, so global pandemic, no biggie. And I
Yeah.
so I was planning on no big thing.
Yeah, nothing.
Was planning on going to grad school right away, but was like, I'm going to move home and just stick around, work for a year, kind of figure out what I'm interested in. Well, at the end of 2020, I was incredibly overweight. And so I was pushing that limit. I was like, I'm
Interesting.
unhealthy. I am not the best version of myself. And
Yeah.
so at the end of 2020, I was like, all right, Ashley. That's one of those things too, where no one can make you have to make that decision for yourself. No one can do it for you. I have to wake up and decide I'm going to do it because I'm the one waking up to do it. No one else is coming banging on my door like, did you work out? Did you eat healthier today? Did you read that book? It's me. So I don't know what switched. It was like end of 2020. I'm like, I'm sick of this because I was like, I have my life in order and I'm organized and I'm a go-getter, but I'm like, the way I physically look does not reflect that I have those habits. And I didn't. And so I, end of 2020 into like 2021, took some time, started learning about eating whole foods, exercising, putting time into myself, being awake early, creating habits. And since then I've lost about 65, 70 pounds. So I'm like I'm a different
Oh,
human. But what's
damn.
crazy, yeah, it's pretty nuts. But in terms of working with athletes, it's a connection point now because they'll come in and they're like, oh, I was up at 5. I was like, yeah, I was too. They're like, oh, I worked out this morning. So did I. Oh, I'm like, yeah. And they're like, you get up there. I'm like, yes. So it's another thing where they're like, oh, I was doing this. I'm like, well, I'm doing that too. So it gets back to relationship building, but back to that activity, part of like that identity and figuring that out. I think in the last like 2 years had to learn those things about myself. And back to what you talked about in your TED talk that I was watching, it's a decision. It's you. You have to
Yeah.
make the decision. You can create those things. And at the end of the day, you're the only one that can do it. And it's the same thing for my students that come in. When they graduate, if they're not going to go pro, no one's going to tell you what to do out there. You have to do it. You have to get up. You have to relearn how to work out. You have to relearn what your passions are outside of those things. Doesn't mean they can't be the same, but it's on you. It's personal responsibility and showing up for yourself. And so, but they're going through huge identity fluctuations and the brain 18 to 23, crazy. Oh, and I'm like, sometimes they come in, I'm like, oh, I can physically see their brain doing these things. Um, I'm more academic too. I'm very much in the academic space, learning about just theories of development, student development, identity development is huge. So, but yeah, so I've had my own journey in identity, and I think that has helped me do my job better.
Yeah, that's actually super fascinating. And well, like two things, like I think underneath like identity, so much of like just in the space in general, I just get irritated because so many words get tossed around, right?
Mhm.
Like, of course, there's all the buzzwords of like competence and leadership and culture and accountability. And another one too is I think it just gets tossed around from it's just casual, like law of familiarity, right? Like we've heard it so much. It's just like, like you need to decide what you want, right? Like, and so
Mhm.
if you literally look at the Latin root of the word to decide, it means to cut off. So when you make a decision, you've cut off all other options. When you decided to come to Clemson, you cut off all other options, right? When
Mhm.
you potentially decided to get married, you've cut off all of like I work one-on-one with a coach and I was just like, they're married, and I was like, you literally cut off
Right.
7, 8 other billion people, right? Like, and so
That's
I
interesting.
think that
Yeah.
like to get them to understand is there's a difference between deciding and dabbling. And most of them
Mm.
spend so much time like dabbling. It's like, well, like I'm kind of thinking about this, I'm kind of thinking about this, or I'm doing a little bit of this, but I didn't really like that. And it's like, well, you're not really making any decisions.
Right.
And even an analogy like in front of teams, I'm like, if 4 of y'all get in the car right now and y'all decide, like, hey, we're hungry, it's going to take you 45 minutes to figure out where the hell y'all are going to go eat. It's like, that's how
Yes.
poor decision makers you
You can,
are.
yes.
So
Well,
then,
and
fast forward that
Yeah.
to life and it's just magnified.
On a huge scale. This is a side note, but I had a friend in college who, you're like, you get together in a group of 4 or 5 people and no one can decide where to eat. And
Yeah,
she was
yeah.
always like, okay, everyone. And she would be like, well, do we want to eat with our hands or with utensils? And we would be like, okay. And then she's like, do you want to walk up to the counter and order, or would you rather someone come to our table and ask us? And you would be shocked. It at
It
least gets you
narrows
down
it
to a
down.
couple.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. I was like, this is something. You are on to something. You should do something with this. But I still use it to this day. People are like, are you serious? I'm like, didn't we just decide where we wanted to go eat? Yes, you're welcome. I'm serious.
Like
um,
that and Netflix decisions are probably like the two, the two. You spend more time scrolling trying to figure out what we're
what
gonna
you're gonna
watch.
watch. And then I won't watch it. And then I'm like, I'm done. It's been 25 minutes. I could have watched a whole episode of something or started a movie. I'm like, I'm out. I'm not doing this. The paradox of choice, or whatever it's
Yeah,
called.
yeah,
But
yeah,
it is. But you do have to make a decision sometimes, because even if you make the decision, you can start. And then it's like internships. That's what I tell students. I have no idea what I want to do. Or like, oh, I'm interested in so many things. I'm like, well, just try something. Because if you do it and you commit to it, you're either going to be like, oh, I don't want to do this. That's a decision, because you're not going to pursue that route anymore. You can give your time and attention to everything else. Or you might do it and you're like, I actually do like this. I'm going to continue to make this decision. But but that's what I think is scary, just in life in general, is like what's on the other side of that decision. But I saw this
yeah,
quote the other day that was like, fear is wide, it's not deep. And it's like things can be scary and it looks on the surface like I'm gonna step into this puddle and I'm gonna sink. But it's like, no, fear goes wide, and it's not, you just have to start, you just have to step in, and
yeah,
it's probably just a little puddle. And I'm like, there's fear in decision making, but at the end of the day, I'm always like, at the end of the day, what's the worst that's going to happen? And for me, I'm like, well, the worst thing that could happen is I don't make it. And I'm like, okay, once I accept that, cool, I'm gonna do anything. Everything good in life is on the other side of taking a risk, taking a step. I wouldn't have my
yeah.
job if I didn't do that. Like, I wouldn't be here if I didn't do that. So you just have to do it. Have you seen We Bought a Zoo with oh gosh,
No,
who's in that movie? I'm
I never
gonna
heard of it. We bought a zoo.
We Bought a Zoo. Oh, incredible movie. Everyone should have to watch it. He ends up purchasing this piece of land that is a zoo, and he commits to restoring it and making sure the animals are all
Okay.
taken care of. But there's this scene, I think it's Matt Damon. If I'm wrong, that's embarrassing, but it's fine. He he's talking to his son, and he's like, his son likes this girl. He has a crush on her. Something's happening, whatever. He's probably 14 or 15. And his dad tells him, he says, sometimes it only takes 20 seconds of insane courage to just do something. And like your whole life could be on the other side of that. And that's something I think about sometimes. If I have to make a
Yeah,
decision
that's good.
where I'm like, I don't know what to do, I'm like, okay, Ashley, 20 seconds. So what? Who cares? Say it, do whatever. And 9 times out of 10, on the other side of the 20 seconds, I'm like, yeah, that was good. That was a good
Yeah,
decision.
yeah, yeah.
But
And and I think it's like a muscle too, right? Like,
mhm, mhm.
I think that like a muscle, a skill probably is a better way to put it, is
You
like
have to
you can
practice
get,
it.
yeah, better and better and better at that skill. Because I think that a lot of people like combining decisions with like curiosity, right? Like the ability to like ask the questions or speak up
Mhm.
or say the things or give the ideas. Because I think a lot of people sit, never make the decision, so to speak. That's why I kind of think that they overlap, is like they have all these creative ideas or questions that they should ask that could lead somewhere, but just be a mute, for
Right.
lack of better terms.
Or like, yeah. Well, and there's a balance too. I'm like, okay, step up, step back. Like, when's the right time to say something? When do I need to make this decision? But at the end of the day, what I've learned too is people people are mostly worried about themselves. Like, as much as people worry about their own, like, what is someone going to think of me? How am I going to be perceived? That's true. And everyone else in the room is usually thinking the same thing. How are you all going to
Totally.
perceive me? How am I going to come off? And so I think there's a balance too. But at the end of the day, you just have to do it sometimes. And it's scary.
Yeah, it's I always think of it as almost every decision we make is based on our status, right? Is this going to help our
Mm,
status or hurt our status? And I don't mean that from I mean, it can be a literal like number of followers status to a
right.
monetary status, but like literally it's just the perception of like how we view our status,
Hmm.
or fame or notoriety, whatever word we want to put in there. And so that's what like we grapple with so often of like how does this alter our status?
Our status. And then, but if you think about the fact that everyone's worried about how their status is going to be altered, I'm like, no, no one's paying attention. No one cares.
Oh, yeah. Because I even think of it, you can think of it from a like entrepreneurial standpoint of like if you go start something, then maybe you need to drive Uber on the side, but people don't want to do that. They want to start the thing, but they don't want to drive the Uber because then that's like people are gonna be like, dang, you must not be very good at business, right? It's this status
Right.
thing of like how it's perceived upon
Hmm.
them.
But, and I think that's interesting too, because that's why people, I think, who have more of like an entrepreneurial, is that the word I'm saying that?
I follow you.
Spirit. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Um, you have to get to understanding that you're going to do what you're going to do at all costs. You're going to sacrifice whatever you have to do it. And it's kind of like that. Oh, I'm worried about this right now and what people might think of me. But in 10 years, 15 years, people are going to work for me, or people are going to see me and be like, dang, I should have, you know, paid more attention to that. And I think that's anything in life, whatever type of journey anyone might be on. Something I think that people forget is that if you have that type of mindset, that is a growth mindset, and you're looking to continue forward, when you have a small goal and you're trying to reach something, you're never, as soon as you're like almost getting to it, you have another one, because
Yeah.
those are the type of people who keep going. And the magic for that, the magic is in the journey. The magic is in getting up at 4 or 5 a.m. because the world's asleep, getting everything done so that by the time you come to work, you're ready to go. The magic is not in, gloating later because you're like, I worked out today and I've lost this much weight. That's not it. When you have that mindset and you adjust to that, the magic is in being there 4 a.m. The magic is in being by yourself. The magic is in that work. And at the end of the day, people, when they see people doing that, whether they say it or not, they want that. Like they
Yeah.
want what that feeling is, but it's scary to start and it's scary to just do it.
And I would even go a step further is you said the magic's in the journey is the magic in who you're becoming, right? It goes back to like identity.
Yes,
People value that. It's like, oh, I wish I could be like them,
that.
right? And
Yes.
you're building that person of like how all those things continue to just translate and you take with you to the
Mm-hmm.
next goal or the next job or the next relationship or like whatever it is, because it's like the cliche of like if you're bouncing from relationship to relationship, well, it's probably because you're the same person, right? Like you're just bringing the same things over and over and over
Thank
again.
and probably not looking in the mirror. Like, if something
Who,
is repeating itself, you should look inward.
where's the comment? But I think that goes back to like um ownership, accountability, whatever you want to
Mm-hmm.
call it, of like once the other saying I'll say with this too is like again, it comes back to identity, like you are the creator of your
Mm-hmm.
life. And so I think that when you recognize how much that you can create, then when bad things happen, it allows you to easily go, okay, that was my fault. What did I do wrong? Right. And
Mm-hmm.
kind of like um stealing this from my ranger buddy, what they call them, like after action reviews, right? It's almost like, okay, like where did this go wrong? And like next mission, like how do I do better? How do I accomplish what it is that I want to accomplish?
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, because that's ultimately what you're trying to build is that next version like of you.
Of yourself. Yes. Well, and I think that's um, it's similar with student athletes too, but just people with that type of mindset, they're looking to improve. So they have a more built in regular rhythm of reflection and feedback for themselves, actually wanting it and seeking it and then taking it in to become better. Um, and that's part of being a leader, being introspective, doing those things. But yeah, no, I think you're right.
So going back to when you made the decision to lose a bunch of weight.
Yes.
So I'm always fascinated was that a like rock bottom moment? Or
I
was
would
it just
say
like I'm just gonna do this?
probably a combination of both. That was probably like the lowest point I had been in my life, just in terms of graduating amid a pandemic, thinking I was going to be doing certain things that I wasn't going to do, moving back home, figuring out who I was as a person. I feel like you go to college and you start to experience the world in a different way, and they're like, hold on, who am I? What's going
Yeah.
on? What's,
Yeah.
and so I think it was kind of a rock bottom. My sister, very into health, very into wellness, and so was when I moved home that year, was surrounded by her, so she's doing this stuff every day. And then I have a history of diabetes in my family, and so like getting older and just starting to see all these things come together, I'm like, oh, I don't want to have to do this. I don't want to be, in a place where I feel like I'm miserable. And what's funny about that is I would say I'm a very confident individual. I think I lived my life feeling that way, and I never let being overweight truly affect my confidence,
Yeah.
which is probably why it went on for so long into my early 20s. But it's crazy to me how on the other side of that, how unhappy I was, but I didn't realize it because I had capped out. I was just like operating at a certain frequency where I could only cap out here. And then once I started taking care of my body, eating better foods, exercising, I'm like, oh, I thought the cap was here. The cap is literally up here. And
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like, this is crazy. And so yeah, one day I was like, okay, we're just gonna do it. But it's a gradual journey. And I started off slow because I'm like, if I go into something Hail Mary right now and just I'm gonna be at the gym 6 days a week lifting, no, that's not gonna last. That's just not
Yeah.
realistic. So I started slow at home. I didn't start going to the gym for like 6 months. I just like worked out at home, walked more, did stuff like that. Um, and kept going. And then once I started that, I was like, oh, this is there's magic in this. This is
Yeah. 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 Well, and I think it's funny, like we as human beings, I think like see the best in people, try not to judge, right? Like
yeah.
to the best of like our abilities. But it's just interesting, like the level of I don't even know if respect is the right word, but like people have a different perspective of people that take care of themselves, right? Like I think that like it's just very fascinating. Like I didn't believe there was a kind of a mentor guy that I follow, and he was just like he's like the only thing I've changed is like I started. He wasn't like in bad shape, but like just started like putting on some muscle, right? And he was just like my sales have gone up, and like literally this
Mm-hmm.
is the only thing. I'm like, man, that is just like so fascinating that there's just
Well,
like this perception and level of respect of like, and I don't know if it's because people almost envy. It's like, man, like I wish I could be like them. I want to be around them, kind of type thing.
I think I've thought a lot about that. I think honestly, I think at its core, what it shows is that you as a person are disciplined. You are going to show up, you are going to get the job done, and your actions in that are reflected in how you show up to people. If I show up with a smile on my face and I have positive energy, it's the same thing. Oh, this is a person I maybe want to be around. Her energy is higher. If I show up and you can tell that I take care of myself, oh, she's locked in. Like she had to do something to make that happen. And I think that's what my experience maybe has been, or something that I've thought about, because I'll tell you what, it's fascinating to experience a life where I was treated a certain way being incredibly overweight, and I experience a life where I'm treated a different way not being overweight. It's
Yeah,
real. um and sometimes I think a lot about it. I'm like, this is how I show up in a space, is people react a different way, and I think that's
yeah.
human nature.
And I think too, going back to when you were talking about, and you used the word like frequency, right? Like I'm like an energy vibes kind of like person,
Okay.
but I also think too is you probably or we whoever, right? Like enter the room with a different frequency, a different energy, a different wavelength, like a different vibe, like whatever you want to call it. And so it's like you don't know what you don't know. And like you said, it's like I was capped here and thinking like this, I'm giving you
This is
everything that I
everything.
have, right?
Uh-huh.
Versus like now that's like below normal, right? To operate like
Right.
where you were before. And so
Well,
I
and I
wonder, like,
think
I think that like people feel that probably too.
100%. And I think too, something I say is like when I wake up, if I wake up and I'll wake up, I do my journal, I do my devotional, I will work out, I cook breakfast, like I get ready for the day. So by the time I usually come into work, I've had about a 4 hour day already. Like by 9 a.m. I'm like, you see those TikToks are like my 5 to 9 before my 9 to 5. I'm like, that's me. Um, but I always joke about this, but I'm like, when I do that, I am mentally almost untouchable. I'm like, you know what? Someone could come in and if they're having a bad day, I'm here for you. I want to hear about it. But I'm like, I'm operating at my brain is literally operating at a different frequency because of what I've done to take care of my body already today. I'm thinking more clearly. I'm thinking in a more sharp way. I probably have different ideas. My energy is going to be higher. But I think people feel that because you can feel it when it's the opposite.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
like, I come in and I'm like, and this isn't reflective of my team. Love my team. The people I work with are go-getters. We're all exercising, doing our thing. But I've had previous roles where I'm like, it's 9 a.m. and I know that you woke up at 8:30 and you're not happy about being
Yeah.
here right now. And I'm like, I'm happy to be alive. And I know that's a privilege and I recognize that. And there's also a decision that you have to make at the end of the day. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And even with like, I think going into, um, not to bring Mr. McLean into the conversation, but even just
Do
like
it.
the foods and everything that like we eat, it's like even like if I start to, I say get sick loosely because I don't go to a doctor, but like if I start to like feel, I literally just start to take inventory. I'm like, okay, like what have I been eating? I'm like, I did eat Taco Bell 3 times this past week.
You're
Probably should
like,
cut that out.
probably not going to help me. Probably right. Well, and I just think, and sometimes too, um, even just medicine and the way we take care of ourselves, it's hard because I'm like, I'm going to try the natural way first. And this is where in my adult life, I've started seeking, instead of going to an MD first, I will go to oh my gosh, it's leaving me. There's a different type of doctor. There's an MD and then there's what are they called? It starts with an O. Um, oh, it's
You
leaving
stumped
me,
me.
but I know I'll have to look it up. But essentially, this type of doctor, they're going to ask you first, how are you taking care of yourself? What foods are you putting in your
Mm,
body? Before they prescribe you a medication or some type of something, they're making sure you're taking care of yourself as a whole person. And I'm like, that's important to me. And I will try a natural remedy first. Certain things I'm like, okay, I probably need medicine for that. There's a reason we have a longer lifespan. And we're eating terrible foods that are shortening some of our lifespans, but that's beside the point. But that's been interesting because I've started seeking out that type of medical care
yeah.
first before going to someone that will just kind of give me something. And so when I was 16, back in high school, it was like my junior year of high school, I was diagnosed with a really rare form of cancer in my sinus. And I dealt with
Mm,
that for like a year and a half, but I had this teacher my junior year who she was my AP environmental science teacher, and she kind of pulled me aside and was like, she had had a terrible stage 4 breast cancer, and she had like walked into this hospital one night on Christmas Eve and they're like, you're not going to live, like you're going to do chemotherapy, this is what you have. And she was like, that's actually not true. I'm like, okay, Teresa. So she did all this research and she essentially ate soil, nutrients from the earth, and did some type of frequency, I don't know the terms, to her body, some type of something, and balanced her hormones, this, that, and the other, and was able to completely shrink her tumor and was fine. And like walked in like 6 months later and they were like, this is a miracle that your tumor's gone. But she and I started talking and she was like, when I had gotten diagnosed with with the cancer in my face, she was like, you should try these natural things, just like giving me some advice. And I think that's when I started, that experience in my life has, maybe I didn't learn those things immediately because I couldn't
yeah.
process what was going on. But in terms of taking care of your body, What are you putting into it? What type of medicine are you willing to just accept or say, hey, sure, because that feels like the only other option. But
Yeah.
the stuff that we're putting in our bodies, the way we treat our bodies, it's not good.
It's
Uh,
yeah, it's very fascinating. And it's
it
like I
is.
think it's just so like counterculture, right? Like it's the
Yes.
opposite of like, and it's marketing at its finest to a lot of degree. And I think that like when people hear me say it's like, well, I don't go to the doctor. I'm like if I shattered my arm, I'm going to the doctor, right? Like
Right.
I'm not eating a basil plant and hoping that the thing like
Hey,
rubbing some butter and some dirt on it and then hoping that the
right.
thing like heals.
That this
I
works.
yeah, like I get that there is a place. Like I totally believe that.
Yes.
But I think that it's just like it's very extreme, right? And it's like you should go like you've been kind of sold, taught, marketed that like you should go to like for everything
Every little thing.
while we feed you toxins.
But that's right. Well, that's where I think where I see things in my life as full circle. So like that happened to me my junior year of high school. So I understand what it is like to have a functioning, healthy, able body because at one point I was compromised in a certain way. And that's why I think I value what I put into my body, how I take care of my body now, because it is a privilege to have this body that operates this way. And then when I look at how I treat my body now, I do feel better. I don't get sick as much. If I'm eating more whole foods and exercising, I have a different outlook mentally. It helps the way I feel mentally every day.
Yeah.
So it's really full circle. And I've been able to see on two opposite ends of the spectrum what can happen when I treat my body poorly and what can happen when I treat it in a very good way because it's the only one that I have. And I'm like, there's something to be said for the way I feel, how I don't get, just all of these things. And I don't know that people always get that or get the opportunity to understand and learn that. But there's definitely something to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And now it's even like it's just gotten so it gets more and more and more tricky because even things that now it's like you just throw organic on anything and then like you're just
Right.
not really organic, but it's kind of like the fat free thing. It's like you can write fat free on it as long as it's like less than like half a gram like per serving or whatever, right? But it still has fat in it. So it's like, is it organic? But it's not organic, but like it meets the standard of organic. So it's like it's just
Right.
it's so confusing too. And it's
It
done on
is.
purpose, like for sure.
100%. And then you walk up and I have like 12 different options of milk that I can pick from. I'm like, how are you, what's different? What's the same? What is, um, so it's confusing. It's a lot and it takes time to learn about it. And there's still so
Yeah.
much I would like to learn and need to learn, but it's just baby steps too, like one thing at a time. I'm like, okay. And then
Yeah.
implement that.
There's an author that I really enjoy reading. Dr. David Perlmutter, as I think's his name. So he's written like Brainwash and something. But anyways, like in the intro of one of his books is there's an island, something culture, I believe it's an island, like somewhere in the world where like I forget how many of like the diseases and sickness and things that we see in America have never even existed there just based off of like because of like how they live and like what they eat. I'm like, man, that's like that like sells it all to me.
It does, and it's scary. I read something the other day that was like the leading cause of death for what my generation is going to be or is projected to be colon cancer, and I'm like, that's a direct correlation to the food we're putting in our bodies.
Yeah,
If
yeah,
that's
yeah.
real, if that's what happens.
So do you have these conversations with kids?
I do. So that's what I love about my job is these are the types of things that we get to talk about and it'll be 30 minutes or an hour will go by and we've gotten down to, what gives you purpose, a lot of them have a faith that they would like to speak about that we can engage in, just different parts of who they are.
Yeah,
And I think that's the coolest thing about what I do is that we talk about everything that exists in the world is really stuff we get to talk about. You know, it's anything they're experiencing in their life as young people, in relationships, figuring out who they are, what's important to them, being away from home, um, how they're making decisions, all of that stuff. This is a representation of, yeah, the type of work that we do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Couple more questions.
Yeah.
First, what's next for you?
That's a great question. I actually just finished my master's degree this semester. Like I mentioned before, I am pretty interested in the academic side of some of these things. And so something
Yeah.
I've thought about is potentially pursuing some type of doctoral degree in whether that's
Oh,
educational, yeah,
oh.
yeah, educational leadership, or something like that. Um, or I love the work that I do. And so continuing to be at Clemson, continuing to just, I like to live by doing the best I can where I'm at. And I think that if you do those things, whatever is next for you is going to happen. Like if you show up as your best self and do your best work. So whether
Yeah,
that means I'm here at Clemson, which I love Clemson and would love that opportunity. Um, Regardless of what it is, I want to work with people. I love
yeah,
relationship building, getting to have just genuine conversations is something that I am passionate about. And with this population of people, student athletes, has been incredibly fulfilling and rewarding. Sometimes it's crazy and chaotic and absolutely hectic. And I get home after the end of the week and I'm like, how do we do that? But most days I leave my office and I've had a really cool conversation with someone or helped someone with something. And I'm like, oh, my heart is overflowing.
and then the next day, heartbroken because they all
Yeah, the
leave.
next day I'm like, yeah. Well, yeah, we just had our grad brunch and celebration and stuff. And it was kind of my first class of seeing people in their first or second year finish and leave. And I was like, oh, I wasn't ready for this.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I just like the OG, right? Of like within the teams that I've worked with a lot of like individuals, like type thing. But like within all the teams, like the first one to be like, tell me what to do, right? Like I like graduated. I was like, the OG's gone. I don't know what to do
Dang,
now.
now what? Yeah. Now what? It's hard. It is hard.
So cool. All right, last question.
Yeah.
I didn't set you up for this one. So if you're in a stadium with 100,000 people and you could leave
Okay.
them with one message, what would your message be?
Stadium with 100,000. I would tell them probably similar to some of the stuff that we talked about, but just whatever you want to do, whatever is next for you, just do it. What like the greatness is already in you. You just have to make that decision. It's already there. Do it. Everyone is scared. No one knows what they're doing. And you just have to commit. And I think if you love and serve people in the process of whatever you're doing, that you're doing the right thing and that can't be harmful. So just do it. Just start. Only you can make that decision and you have to do it because you have to go to bed every night and be okay with who you are and the decisions that you're making. And so be yourself, lean into it, step into it, and love and serve people in the process. That's what I would say.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. One of the things is like I'm like tell people I'm like I'm actually really stupid because I'm not going to teach you or give you anything new because everything that you already have is inside of you. My job is just to unlock the door, help you either show you the key or help you unlock the
Remind you
door.
that it's
That's it.
there. Yep.
That's it. I was like, I'm actually not that smart. I promise. I'm really dumb,
Yeah.
right? And they're like, wait, what? So, but I think that like people recognize because they think that they need like this magic fairy dust or something external outside of them to like make the
Mhm.
decision or take the leap of
To do it.
faith or
Yeah.
like whatever it is. And it's like, no, man, like
Yeah.
you literally have everything you need right now.
And that's something, whether I think it's whatever space you're in, it could be a job search, it could be a team, whatever it is, your most competitive edge in any space that you are in is that you are you. Because you can't walk into the room with my experiences and I cannot walk into the room with your experiences. So what good does it do me to try and be Ryan when I'm Ashley? No one else is Ashley. You don't get to be Ashley. I get to be Ashley. So why not lean into that and be that person when I walk in the space? I have skills and I have gifts that are mine, and you have gifts that are not mine. But you know what makes a team? When we both lean into those and we can operate together toward a common goal. So people just be your authentic self.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Mic drop moment. Cool. I appreciate it, dude. This was fun.
Thanks. So fun. Appreciate you. Great to chat. Me too. All the things.
Always. Until next time, everybody. Peace.